Hello and welcome to Scotty Kilmer Live Car Talk, where I give answers to all your car questions worldwide. You notice there's no sponsors all over the place here. I'm sponsored by The Truth. They've been working on cars 51 years. I like helping everybody out with their problems. Remember, during the show, ask your question in the live chat. Then I answer them when I find good ones. We'll start out with Mighty Mouse 1286. Is getting a Toyota Yaris a solid choice for a second car? Heard it's really a Mazda and a Toyota Shell. Thanks. Yes, that's true. They are Mazdas. Now, they're a cheaper car, but if you want a second little car, I actually have quite a few customers that have those as second cars. Say the husband gets a nice car for the wife, then he uses the Yaris to go back and forth to either a park and ride or to work itself. They can last a long time. I've got customers with Yaris's that have 150,000 miles, and they're still running okay. They're little puddle jumpers. They ride kind of bumpy, and they're not super fast or anything, but they can last quite some time, and they can be a good second car for just knocking around in. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, especially if you buy a used one. You can get a used one cheaper, and then who knows how many years it'll last. Next question. New England Endler says, how much sawdust should I put in the rear end to stop the gear noise? Well, that's an old trick. People did that in my days when I was young, and my grandfather's days when he was a mechanic. They'd put it in to quiet down the noise. Now, on an old-fashioned car, it would quiet it down quite a bit because they were just straight cut gears, and you put it in and it would quiet them down quite a bit. Nowadays, they're much more complex. Of course, you really wouldn't want to do it because limited slip diffs and stuff, it would ruin them. They wouldn't work at all. But that's something people used to do. They used to actually put sawdust in them, and the sawdust would get in the spaces that were worn, and it would quiet them down some. I don't advise anybody to do it, but people used to do it in the past. So you must be older to know about that. Next question. New England Endler says, why does the ABS come on at very low speeds, 5 to 10 miles an hour, on icy roads? Doesn't do it all the time. Okay, here's the thing. If you're on icy roads and you hit the brakes, often the ABS system is going to start to actuate. Because if one tire out of all four of them is on ice and the other three or whatever combo, it's going to activate the anti-lock brake system. And it's only going to do it when it sees there's a problem. So if it's dry pavement and you find that it never does it, there's nothing wrong with your system at all, because it's only doing it when some of the wheels are on ice, and it's supposed to activate it then. That's just what happens. Now, if it does it on dry pavement, yeah, then you got a problem. Then you'd want a guy like me to hook up his fancy scan tool to see what the ABS codes were. But if it only does it on icy roads, it's totally normal. They're designed for that. Next question. John Carlson says, why do my brakes bounce when I stop on a rough road? It's a 99 GMC Sierra pickup. Okay, here is the thing. When you're talking about you are stopping on a rough road and your brakes start to bounce, that normally is telling you that your shocks are badly worn or some suspension part. Because when you hit the brakes and it's bumpy, if you've got shocks that are worn, it's going to make the brakes go on and off because they're moving around too much. Or if you got a worn suspension part, it's going to make things bounce because you're putting more. When you hit the brakes, you're straining the suspension more. So whenever you have a suspension problem, hitting the brakes is going to accentuate it. So jack up the front end, check for a tie rod ball joint wear, and check to see if the shocks are worn out. Next question. Curtis S. says, hey, Scotty, I have a few keys and I need to reprogram the immobilizers on. Wanted to know if you ever tried OBD Star X 100 Pros and the X Tool X 100 Pro key programmers. Are they any good for about $200? Well, I've never tried those particular ones, but from my experience, I've never found a key programmer that worked that cost less than about $1,000. The ones that I have, one was $1,200, the other was $5,500. And I have even hired locksmiths to come over to my shop here because I don't like messing with that stuff generally. And they said, no problem, Scotty, we'll make a key for your customer's Lexus for $100. I said, fine, come on over. Well, they came over, and after an hour and a half, they gave up and they left. I said, well, I'm not paying you because you said you could do it. But even with their fancy equipment, they couldn't program it. So odds are, I doubt that those things would work all that well. You want to find a professional locksmith to do that kind of stuff that works on cars. That's going to guarantee that stuff. That's the best way to go. Don't try to do it yourself. That cheaper stuff, generally it doesn't work very well. I tried different ones. I didn't try those, but I tried other ones, and none of them worked all that well for a range of cars. Next question. Al1690 says, any tips for overhauling the fuel system on my 1973 air-cooled Volkswagen camper? I have a strong fuel smell in the cab, which I think is caused by Paris rubber pipes. Okay, it's an air-cooled job. It's an old one. It's a 73. So, I worked on one a couple months ago. And the first thing I did was I went to the gas tank and I unscrewed all the screws where the fuel sending unit was. And it turns out that gasket in there was just rotten and the fumes were coming out of there. So I would change that first because that's an obvious one. Then follow the lines. It's old, but still that stuff is steel. Your fuel lines are mainly steel. But where their little rubber hoses are, you want to check them to see if they're rotten because a lot of times they'll rotten. Follow them the whole way through. And if you do find a bunch of steel lines that say they're old enough that even the steel is leaking, my advice is just buy some good rubber fuel line and bypass the whole thing with rubber lines. The pressure on that system is negligible, so it's not like you need something on a modern GDI engine where the fuel lines can hold 20,000 PSI. Those things are only holding like 2 pounds per square inch pressure from a fuel pump, so they'll work perfectly fine with rubber fuel lines. Next question. Dong Army Strangler says, can you use urine as an emergency power steering fluid, like if you have trouble in Death Valley? No. But here's one that kind of ties in. A friend of mine was in the Korean War, and they're driving a Jeeps around. And when their brake systems would leak, they would pee into the brake container. And as long as it was above freezing outside, it actually would let it stop somewhat. You know, if it leaked that bad, they kept peeing in it and driving. But you can't do it in the power steering because that's different. It doesn't work very well with water. It needs a hydraulic type fluid. But the guy told me in Korea, they peed right into the brake master cylinder. And in an emergency, they could stop it. It wasn't perfect, but if it kept leaking out fast enough and people are shooting at you, I guess you really wouldn't care. Next question. Rick S90 says, hey, Scotty, I did my oil change in a 5.4 Triton engine, and I inadvertently put maybe half a quart of oil extra. Will that cause any internal damage if I drive it? Okay, that's a good question. And you're going to find that that small amount in a short period of time really isn't going to hurt anything at all. You don't really have to worry about it. But if you left in 2 quarts, 3 quarts for a long period of time, over a long period of time, hey, it would cause damage. The extra oil would make seals leak. And if you put a whole bunch of extra oil, 3, 4, 5 quarts, it could put so much oil that you could actually start bending the piston rods from the oil taking up too much space, and air and gasoline spray compact, but oil doesn't compress much, so it would ruin that. Next question. Jan Sobania says, Scotty, do you know anything about the 2002 to 2008 Hyundai Tiburons with the 2-liter engines? Are they somewhat reliable? Yes, they are. But the problem is some of those Hyundai engines that they made in the United States actually had problems. They did some machining wrong. So if you're thinking about buying one of those, the first thing you want to do is get your VIN number and go to that website that the government has about recalls, the National Highway Traffic Safety Association. Go to the website and you can type in your VIN number and it'll tell you if there's any recalls or problems. And if that's one of the engines that they had problems with, if it is, don't buy it, because they have had problems unless that engine's been replaced. They had to replace a lot of them for free. If it had been replaced and they have proof it was replaced, it'd be totally fine. But check it first. That National Highway Traffic Safety Association, they have some pretty good information on their website. And of course, the government's all totally free, so you don't have to pay anything for it. Next question. Michelle Villanueva said, Scotty, I have a pass lock problem in a 2010 Chevy Equinox. I did the 30 minutes to program the key. It will not work. I replaced the ignition switch. It still didn't work. What do you think is the problem? Okay. Those things are complicated. The only way you can work at it without guesswork is to have a dealer level scan tool that analyzes those systems. I'm a mechanic. I got one of those things. Find somebody with one and at least let them analyze it, because the key, the immobilizer, has to communicate with the receiver that's inside the steering column, and a lot of things have to be reprogrammed if any of that stuff is going. Like you said, you replace the ignition switch. Well, you can't just replace the switch and drive. It's got to be reprogrammed. So let a pro check it out first and go from there. It might just need to be reprogrammed. I see it all the time. It's like guys will say, guy told me I had a bad computer, but he wanted too much money, so I went to a junkyard and put one in. Now the car won't start. Well, on most late model cars, they never will start with another computer. The computer has to be put in a car, then it has to be reprogrammed to accept the immobilizer system and to accept everything else in the car. So have a pro check it out first. Pray it just needs to be reprogrammed. Next question. Ron Wojcik says, Scotty, haircut. Yeah, my wife and my son were whining at me. Said I look like an owl with the hair sticking out of the side. So I went and got a haircut. It's winter here, so that's kind of counterintuitive, but it's not that cold today. It's going to be 72 and the sun's shining. So I decided to get a haircut. Didn't have to think about it for a while. Next question. The 808 says, should I get a Honda Prelude? Okay, Honda Preludes, they're pretty well-made vehicles. It depends on what year and what make and model. Now, I got a customer that bought a used Prelude, but the thing was 30-something years old. And by then, let me tell you, you don't want to be buying one that old generally. Everything starts to break. We're in Texas here, you got to have air conditioning. Well, guess what? According to Honda, all the air conditioning parts for his car were obsolete and they didn't make them anymore. So we had to either get used or remanufactured parts, and they kept breaking. They either didn't fit, they weren't good, or the remanufactured compressor would break. So if you're talking about a real old one, I wouldn't advise buying one, unless you're a mechanic and you want to keep working on it. If you're talking about a later fuel injected one, sure. Just don't buy one that's got 300,000 miles on it, because it's pretty well worn out. You have to realize that too. A lot of times the stuff will just flat wear out when they get to be really old. Next question. Larry Winter says, I got a 2015 Malibu with 41,000 miles. Should I keep it? Okay, you're in the twilight zone of cars. Okay, I don't like GM cars. Those Impalas are very poorly made cars. But here's the thing. You got a 2015. You probably owe more money on it than the thing is worth. And if that's the case, you only got 41,000 miles. Hey, drive the thing till the wheels fall off. That's my advice with that. But if you could sell it and get what you owe, what you could get another vehicle for, go ahead and get rid of it right away and get something else. Get a good used Toyota Camry or Corolla or something like that. But if you can sell it for a reasonable amount of money, feel right ahead and do it. Just if you can't, don't eat all that money because they generally don't fall apart till they get 90 or 100,000 miles, and you might get some more use out of it. Don't ever lose a ton of money if you don't have to win a car. I mean, if you're going to lose a ton selling it now, yeah, just keep driving it until the wheels fall off. Next question. Rolando Cameron says, I have a Nissan Altima 2014. I was driving down the highway and the RPM needle stopped moving. It doesn't drive anymore. Is it my reliable CVT transmission gone bad? Okay, you said your RPM needle stopped moving. Now, if you can put it in neutral and you can rev up the engine, and the RPM revs up and down, up and down, up and down, the engine's running okay. And odds are it is the CVT transmission. That's one of the worst things that Nissan makes. Don't ever buy one. I mean, don't ever buy one, period. But certainly don't buy a Nissan with the CVT transmissions. I talked to all my transmission buddies, and they all say, hands down, Nissan has the worst CVT transmissions in the world. So I would not buy one. And hey, if yours is out, then you got to decide, you want to put a bunch of money in and fix it, or you just want to get rid of the stupid thing and then buy a Toyota or Honda instead. Next question. Crash 310 says, is dry gas necessary to use anymore? Okay, very good question. Now, when I was young, I lived up in Niagara Falls. We used dry gas all the time because if you had water in the bottom of your gas tank, or if the gas you pumped from the gas tank at the store had water in it, when it got below 32 degrees, if it freezed and got in your fuel line, you couldn't drive anywhere. So we'd put it in every once in a while. But you have to take in consideration, in the olden days, the gas tanks at the gas stations were just made out of steel. They would rust over time. Water would get impregnated. Then you get water in the gas and they pump it up. For a long time in the United States, at least, they had to dig up all of those tanks and put out these fiberglass reinforced tanks that aren't going to rust. They don't have that problem. So modern day, a lot of times you don't need to put the dry gas in. And another reason that you really generally don't have to use dry gas in the United States is take a look at the gas at the pump. And it usually said may contain 10% ethanol. Well, ethanol is alcohol, which is pretty much dry gas anyways. So you're already getting like 10% ethanol in it. So you really don't have to worry about it these days. Next question. Andres Palacio says, next question. Hey, Scotty, should I buy a Honda Civic or a Honda Fit? Okay. Those are both good vehicles, but they're different types of vehicles. The Civic is a small car, and the Fit is like a small SUV. What do you want? The Civic, of course, is going to handle better. It's going to corner better, lower to the ground. The Fit, you can put more crap in it. It's a higher up vehicle. It really depends on what you want. Now, either way, get a standard transmission if you know how to drive standard, because the automatics are the weakest things in Hondas. But you throw that aside, they're both pretty good vehicles. It depends on what one you want to get. They're both dependable. I wouldn't say don't get one over the other because they're both dependable, but they're different types of vehicles. You got to decide what you really want. Next question. John Cree says, should I get a Jeep Liberty? No, not if you value your money. I was just reading and doing a little research, and I agreed with the research. They said that the Jeep Liberty was one of the worst 10 cars of the year. Uh, Chrysler got taken over by Fiat. The quality went even further down than it was, and it wasn't that great to begin with. I would not buy one. All my customers ended up hating the vehicles. Some of them got rid of them when they had 30,000 miles because they were having too many problems already. Don't buy one of those. It's just not worth buying it. The only way I'd say buy one is if you could get a used one real cheap for $2 or $3 and it ran and it shifted good as it stood then. And then you wouldn't have much to lose. And if you used it as a weekend toy, what the heck? But don't buy one full price new, that's for sure. Kimo the cat says, I just bought an '03 Suzuki Ariel for $1,200 with 120,000 miles. What's your opinion, Scotty? Okay, here's the thing about Suzukis. I used to have a Suzuki 750 motorcycle. It was a screamer. Scared the heck out of me. It was too fast for even me. I mean, 170 miles an hour. Never broke. Didn't leak oil. They're insane motorcycles. But they're cars, kind of cheesy little things. They pulled out of the United States decades ago because of bad sales, and they fell apart and people didn't like them. Now, it depends where you live. In other countries, people like Suzukis. They can get parts. People fix them. They want the high gas mileage, and they're not driving them that many miles. Go ahead and buy one there. But in the United States, not a smart move because you can't get parts for the stupid things. But if you live in another part of the world, I know people that have them like in Australia, and they like them. They have fun driving them around. But they weren't very well made. Don't think they're going to, last a really long time without having problems, especially automatic transmissions. If you're going to buy one, at least try to get a standard transmission. Eldar Noble says, Scotty, what do you think of the 2018 Honda Accord Sports? Are they reliable and worth the money? Okay. Hondas are well-built vehicles, and generally the sports are going to be standard transmission. Then they're very, very reliable. The automatic transmissions, Honda's always had a problem with their automatic transmissions. But are they worth the money? As far as I'm concerned, no new vehicle is worth the money. They just charge too much money for them. And realize when you drive them off the lot, you're losing 30 to 40% the value of the vehicle right off the bat. So, hey, do like I do. Well, I wait until they're 8 or 10 years old, but at least wait until they're 5 years old. Then their value plummets, and you can get them cheaper. And maybe you've got 80% of the lifespan left, and you're paying 60 or 70% off of what the original price was. So you get a good deal then. Next question. Ernesto says, how do you know if a fuel pump's going out in your car? Very good question. Fuel pumps pump the fuel to the engine. In modern cars, they're all fuel injected, and the pressure has to be within very certain parameters. Like if it's 40 to 42 psi, it's got to be that. And if you've got a gasoline direct injection, the main pump can put out up to 20,000 psi. When your fuel pump is going out, it doesn't pump enough pressure most of the time. It won't accelerate, or it'll only go to 50, 60 miles an hour, not any faster. Or you'll get a check engine light, and it'll be engine running too lean. Because if the pump isn't pumping enough fuel, it'll run lean. It'll got enough air, but not enough fuel. That's a good way of telling. Now, you can also use your ears because modern fuel pumps, they're almost all in a gas tank. They're silent. You hear nothing. And if all of a sudden you start hearing, and you take the gas cap off, put your ear there, and you hear, that means the fuel pump's starting to go out, and change it soon before it strands you in the middle of nowhere. Next question. BC Green says, Scotty, how do you clean and maintain a good safety belt? Okay, safety belts are simple. They just got a little latch in them. But a lot of them are electronic, and they have a switch inside to tell the computer that you have your seatbelt latched on. So the best way of that is just using the modern WD-40 because WD-40 lubricates, but it also does not harm electrical parts. So you could spray some on, and then you wipe the excess off, and you won't have any problems with them sticking, and you won't ruin the electrical portion, because say if you just use spray oil, well, hey, that's going to ruin the electronics, but the WD-40 is electronic safe. So, that's a good way, and it actually shines quite well. I know guys that if they're kind of sleazy and they're selling a used car, they actually get WD-40 and they put it all over the paint. It makes it look shiny for a few days. It's a dirty trick that people have done. I've known people who bought cars like that, and then later they looked horrible. But it's actually good for making things look shiny, too. So try some of that. Next question. Randy O says, I got an '01 Ford Ranger. Every time I put fuel in, it leaks from the neck where I insert the nozzle. Okay, here's the thing. In the neck there are hoses. Check to make sure those hoses aren't clogged up, because I've seen wasps build little nests in there, spiders build nests, rocks get in there, dirt get in there, and if it doesn't vent, then the gas will spit back up and come out of the top. And the other thing is, realize that the filler there generally has a rubber hose that goes down into the tank. They got clamps on them. Sometimes the clamps get old, slip off. Or sometimes that neck is just made out of rubber, cracks, and it comes out of there. So check that too. You can get a flashlight, check it all. Do it at night, because then if there's a crack and you stick the flashlight in and you look under, you'll see the light escape and you don't know there's a hole somewhere. Next question. Bergman Dallo says, Scotty, what do you think about Motul engine oil for cars? Okay, I've used Motul engine oils for motorcycles for years. They make great racing motorcycle oil. I put it in all my motorcycles, and I never had any engine problems with them, so I swear by it. Now, I never used it in cars, but if they make it for cars, I guess they do, I'm sure it would be a very good oil. I'm sure it'd be very expensive, too, because my motorcycle oil is like $10 a quart. And I don't know if you need to spend that much money. But if they do make it and you don't mind the price, I'm sure it's very good oil, because their motorcycle oil is just top notch. Now realize that motorcycle oil is different than car oil, because the motorcycle oil, not only does it go in the crankcase of the engine, but it also goes into the gearbox, at least on most modern motorcycles. So it has to take the shear of gears grinding against each other and the slamming of pistons from the engine. So it's a little bit different than car motor oil. Next question. Corin Brush says, Scotty, what would be a good reliable scanner for a beginner mechanic? Thanks. Okay, well, you did say mechanic. So if you want to go to a good level, go to Amazon. I like a lot of these Actron scanners. I use one professionally all the time, and they're about $200 now. Now, if you don't want to go that far, get one of theirs. It's about $100, and they're pretty good scanners. Or if you want to use your cell phone, get one of those Blue Drivers. The Blue Driver is like $99, and it does quite a bit for $99. Blue Driver, you could check that out. And that works on your cell phone, and it's got pretty good software in it. Next question. Jose Rubio's awesome says, Scotty, I bought an 05 Toyota Matrix with the P0420 code, tried lacquer thinner, and now the code intermittently turns on and off. Should I try the lacquer thinner again? Yeah, go right ahead and try it. That means that the catalytic converter is inefficient. If it runs okay, it's not going to hurt anything. Try it again. And I mean, if it stays off for quite some time, heck, just reset the computer before your state inspection next time and drive it around a day or two. And if the light doesn't come back on, go and get it inspected and ignored it. I had a customer with one that I reset it for him 4 years in a row. And then he'd go and get it inspected 2 days later after he drove it a while. The 5th year he brought it in, and I said, you don't need me. There's no problems with it now. So after 4 years of just driving it, all of a sudden it decided that the cat was okay now. He didn't fix anything. He just drove it that way. It could be maybe the gasoline that he bought was a little higher quality, and then it burned better. I figured that's what happened with him. But it's kind of funny that 4 years in a row it tripped the code, and the 5th year it stopped doing it and passed all by itself. Next question. Eto Rosnerall says, what do you think about a Honda dealer using a flushing machine instead of draining refill for the automatic transmission? No, never use a flush machine. I have seen too many people use flush machines and it ruined the automatic transmission. Drain and refill is the only thing you should do with a Honda, because when you flush, you're using pressure, and sometimes little pieces of crud will get jammed into a hole, and a transmission that had no problems in the first place ended up having a whole bunch of problems later on. So never use a flush machine. The only time I say to people, well, give it as a last resort. If they got a transmission that doesn't even move, what the heck? Have a guy hook up a flush machine and try to flush it to see if at least it'll start running. But if it works decent now, do not have it flushed. Well, that's it for today. Now, remember, every day of the week, I upload 2 videos on the Scotty Kilmer channel, so subscribe. You'll never miss another one. And remember to hit the notifications bell so you'll be notified every time I put up a new video. And I'm here every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live answering your questions, and Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live. So I'll catch you on Saturday if I don't see you until then.